Hey, Hugo, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, great to have you on here. Excited to dive into your story and how you've built a business. I thought we could just start off with a little bit of background for you. I mean, you've been in the marketing world now for quite some time, and if you could share, where the interest in marketing come from, and then specifically around Hispanic marketing or marketing to the Hispanic community. Um, just yeah, kind of fill us in on where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a digital marketing nerd since like junior high, high school. I was blogging a lot, really involved in social networks, really involved in video editing at a really early age. And so I knew that I would be involved to some degree in my career, having, some involvement in digital media. But to what extent, I didn't really know. And
Mm,
my career just accidentally started in lead generation in consumer finance when I graduated from university. So that just taught me that marketing was much more than branding and color schemes and brand guidelines, and it had a lot to do more with algebra, inputs and outputs. So that was actually more interesting to me in the long term
mm,
than being involved in more creative discussions. And
right.
while those are interesting, I just feel like metrics and funnels was just more interesting for me. So I just pursued that. I had always been involved in lead generation thereafter since 2010
Hmm.
in the financial space and then in legal. But the reason I got into Hispanic marketing or Hispanic lead generation is namely because Hispanic lead generation companies didn't really exist.
Mm.
It's still a fairly new concept, which I thought was interesting considering that 20% of the United States is Hispanic.
Can you speak to, so, I mean, and you've been in the marketing world for, I guess, 14, well, almost 15 years now. You mentioned got a start in lead generation, which is also, interestingly, one of the companies I had back in the days also was focused on lead generation. So I have a deep respect and understanding for that space and for that industry. But I'm interested, like, why, I guess two parts. Why did you actually arrive at and decide to focus specifically around kind of legal, lawyers, law firms? So that's my number one. And then the second question I'd love just to tee up for you, and we'll come back to, uh, is why do you decide, or do you remember the process or kind of where you were, for you to arrive at, yes, I should focus on the Hispanic community. It's underserved. It's a big opportunity because, there's lots of opportunities that surround all of us all the time. Yet most of us don't necessarily take advantage or don't move forward with something. We think about it, we don't actually take action on it. So those two things, starting off the legal law firm side, why that?
Yeah, so legal, it was more so a function of where my last job was as an employee. For around 2017, I worked at a legal lead generation company,
Okay.
and they had a particular way, a particular business model that sold data, um, very transactionally. And I saw an opportunity to help attorneys with their branding, with the creative aspect of their firm, but also the super nerdy lead gen funnel, deliverables.
Right.
So I saw that as an opportunity, namely because I had spoken to so many attorneys during that time who'd said, I don't mind buying leads, but I would love to brand myself to the Hispanic market. And you
Mm,
hear those conversations were had where I'm from in Los Angeles County,
sure.
and naturally, I think a lot of attorneys that spoke to me, because I am Hispanic, assumed that maybe I could help them out there. And um, because of those conversations, I started Abogados Now, which is Hispanic digital marketing specifically for attorneys.
Hmm.
And that was really the impetus of it. It was just natural conversations with attorneys. The market just told me what to do, right?
Yeah.
I was just really sensitive to what they were saying, what they wanted, and just going beyond that transactional lead sales. I wanted to give them something a little deeper for their business.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning right now is really important and often not really appreciated, or people don't spend enough time, really looking for those signs. But you're essentially saying that you put yourself in a position where you are having conversations, over and over again, and you start to see the data, right, the writing on the wall that there's a need, there's interest, and then you took action on that. And I think maybe that's a lesson for everybody here, because it doesn't matter whether you're just getting started or maybe you've been building your consulting business for, well over a decade. But when you think about launching into new markets, new products, new services, the market will often kind of give you signs or signals of where there is a need, where there's an opportunity, if you're putting yourself out there to actually, receive that kind of information, which generally comes through conversations, meeting people at events, doing research, right? All that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that you shared that. I'm wondering, what advice would you have, Hugo? Because I know you talked to lots of different, business owners, and you yourself kind of went through this process, or at least kind of, the thought process of narrowing in, finding the niche. What advice would you have for business owners that maybe right now are quite broad? Like they are saying, we provide digital marketing services, or we do management consulting, or, we do strategy and planning consulting. What would you kind of tell those people?
Yeah, I think find the niche that you're excited about, right? Like the one that emotionally or without calculation, um, it gets you out of bed.
Mm.
And I hate to sound like a romantic, but I really don't think that what I do is work. I think it's really fun what I do. And so the niche that I initially thought I was in was legal. And so our flagship company, Avogados Now, is only focused on attorneys. But as we grew over the last 6 years, I received countless emails and texts and outreach from other non-attorneys, debt companies, credit card companies, medical companies that came to us and asked, "Hey, can you help us out with this Hispanic angle that you have?" Reaching out to Hispanics through digital media. And it dawned on me that the niche I'm in wasn't legal.
Mm.
It's Hispanic marketing, Hispanic digital marketing. And so I think that was pretty eye-opening. And again, I'm just trying to listen to the market to see what they want. So I think the advice that I have is listen to what the market wants, niche down, because having an expertise, like there's that Alex Hormozy quote where it's like, if you go narrow and deep, you really own something, whereas being broad and wide doesn't really make you, all that interesting or unique. So I
Yeah.
think the niching down is super important, as long as it's something that you're interested in.
Yeah.
So I find that the content marketing I'm doing for attorneys or medical professionals or any verticals, I get excited talking about demographics and Hispanic usage on mobile phones and Hispanic social media trends. It's not necessarily the trade that I'm talking about. It's more so the market that I like
Mm-hmm.
talking about. So that niche to me is really exciting, and especially because it's so underrepresented.
Yeah. Two things stand out for me on that. I mean, one, just specifically about you saying focus on what you're interested in or what you find interesting. And this is the kind of advice that we provide consultants as well. It's, if you're going to spend time building a business and working to become an authority in that space, you're probably going to need to do a lot of research. You're probably going to spend time creating a lot of content, whether that is for presentations and speaking, or doing a podcast like this, or just publishing on LinkedIn or publishing into trade journals. Like, you're going to be spending time on X, whatever X is. You might as well pick something that you're going to enjoy spending that time on, rather than just something that you don't. And then the second thing that you mentioned, which I'm also a very big believer in and share with clients, is people often look at companies that are successful and are quite broad. So they haven't really niche down, right? Or niche down, right? Depending how you want to kind of being in Canada or US, right? You say that word a little bit differently. But but the challenge, or I think the mistake in viewing successful companies, established companies that are broader, that have, for example, you take a consulting website, LEK or Accenture or BCG, right, and you go like, these guys have 25 different capabilities. They're successful. Shouldn't I do the same thing? The problem with that is that's not how they started, right? That's where they are today, when they have thousands or tens of thousands of people. They have different departments. They can essentially do that. But what you're talking about, and what we're often looking at, is companies at a much smaller scale. And so especially when you're starting off and wanting to kind of own a market or really make a name for yourself, you can't be all things to all people, because you just come off as being too general, too hard to remember. So I think the point that you're making there is really great.
Yeah, I think like it's build brick by brick, right? And I think it's like respectful to your client base as well, because if you're working with them, let's say you work in pharmaceuticals, right? And that's your niche. You want your pharmaceutical client to know that you're just kind of obsessed about their industry.
Mm-hmm.
You're not distracted with like fast food or with e-com or with beauty brands. I think having all these different verticals, I mean, for me particularly, I can't be distracted. I'm easily distracted. And working with multiple verticals at once, I think would do a disservice to the client.
Yeah.
Whereas, niching down, I think I see that as a benefit because everything that you learn from one client can be shared amongst all other clients in that season of niching down, whether that season is a few months or the next few years or the next decade. It just serves your client better, and it makes you look better. Ultimately, I think it just makes you look more authoritative in the space.
So I want to take the comment that some people are going to have who are joining us right now going, but I can provide expertise. I have experience in many different industries. And my response to that generally is, and so I want to hear your thinking on this, Hugo, as well. Typically focusing on industry is the best way to establish specialization and to really, work to dominate it and own a market. The other, though, if we use your example of somebody who's fast food or in legal or pharmaceutical, the other way is to figure out who's specifically inside of those companies. Can you make the ideal client where you're working just with them? So, for example, maybe it's you work with CMOs, all right, chief marketing officers at pharmaceutical companies or fast food or whatever, but they tend to be at the same size. So maybe it's Fortune 500 CMOs, and you build your brand around being the person that serves CMOs as opposed to being, how do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's because that conversation with the CMO is different than the director of marketing or the
Correct.
general manager or even the CEO. So I think there's that in and of itself is a niche. It doesn't have to be industry specific. But I think ultimately, if that's your end buyer, you just want to appeal to the end buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more CMO to CMO. I could see a huge value in being the CMO consultant.
There we go. Okay, we'll start a new business on that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of fast forward then to present day. Your company today, right? A multi-million-dollar marketing consultancy. You employ, I believe, over 16 people. What's the actual number today in terms of number of full-time, part-time contractors?
I think it's like 50. Let's just call it 51. A
51.
third,
Okay.
yeah, more. So it's like 15 are full-time payroll. Another 17, more or less, are part-time, and then the rest are contractors that come in and out of our ecosystem, depending on how much work there is.
Okay, I got it. So I think our research was based on just the full-time because that's definitely more that. Okay, what I'm wondering about is, can you walk us through the kind of the chapters of how you've got to 51, right? So go back to first couple of years in business. What did it look like? I mean, it's you and who else? And then if you could kind of create some chapters around who you hired and when you hired them, roughly kind of grouping them together, what would that look like in terms of the hires that you made?
Yeah, so I initially ran it as a consultancy. I was selling myself based on my prior jobs, reaching out to those clients saying, hey, I have my own shop now. Let's chat. That really worked out really well because I didn't have to work too hard to establish credibility. I just referenced my LinkedIn page and their history with those prior those vendors. And so that was just myself. And it's funny, I just had this conversation yesterday that I lost money on my first client because I made all the mistakes you could make in that first client.
Give us an example. Like what were those mistakes?
Oh, I mean, subcontracting a web developer whose fees I paid all up front, and then that person just disappeared. It's like classic stuff, So lost. I think it was like a $7,000 contract, and I was in the hole like 14,000 to get it up and running. So yeah, classic story. Never happened again, fortunately. I think I learned a lot very quickly, but I learned very quickly that I needed help.
Right.
I got that third or fourth client as a consultancy, selling myself, and it was around like the 3 or 4 month mark that I brought one person to help me in, and then we just did a lot of subcontracting, trying to fire myself from a lot of roles at a very micro level. And it was like year 2 where we started aggressively hiring because I started doing a lot more cold email outreach. And that was really, really effective for getting new clients beyond folks that already knew me or folks that knew where I worked.
Who are you reaching out to? When you say cold outreach, so you're sending emails. Who are you sending those emails to?
To attorneys, it's just what I knew the most.
Yeah.
And
are these Hispanic attorneys or just like all types of, people of all kind of background? Okay.
Yeah, so overwhelmingly our customer is not Hispanic. Okay. But what they do know is that there's value in marketing to the Hispanic market.
Right.
So they just don't know the language. They don't have any, marketing expertise to reach out to them. So our value proposition was always, hey, John, we know you don't speak any Spanish, but you live in West Covina, and West Covina has 900,000 Hispanics. Let's get you connected to a portion of them. And so that was like a really interesting, value proposition to them, because typically they're just being inundated by SEO companies telling them about rankings. But here we are telling them about a completely underrepresented market from which that they interact with every day, and they generally don't connect to through their marketing. And so that was our cold email outreach efforts. And that's when we started hiring, more aggressively for people to manage in our social media department, right, copy department, web design.
So Hugo, were you hiring people because you were just starting to get so many conversations and responses back from those that you were reaching out to through cold outreach, and you're just essentially kind of staffing up to deliver on the new kind of pipeline of clients?
Yeah, we're always, which could be controversial, I guess. Some agency owners think we're crazy, but we always overstaff for what we anticipate, what we forecast as new work in the next 3 months.
And so when you think about that, right, as you said, some people might think that that's crazy. What's your mindset? What's the model or the analysis that you run to feel comfortable in doing that?
It's a human capital business. You don't want to stress out your team. If there's a little inefficiency in, let's call it production margin, but it's not at the expense of their well-being, the team's well-being, and they feel like they're not super overwhelmed, I think that's a win. It helps with retention. So, some months they're not as busy because some months are better than others in sales. Right. But I think that net is a good thing.
Yeah. Do you factor in margin? Because I would imagine, some people are going to look at that and go, yeah, if we bring on these 2 or 3 new people, I don't yet know whether we're going to have enough work for them, or if we do, it may not be full time, but I'm making this commitment to them. It's also going to impact our margin. How do you process that?
It's just high confidence in our ability to get more clients. So we just know that every quarter we're going to have more business than the prior quarter. So we just prepare for that, regardless of however, much of a massive margin win it is, or potentially even a net loss. That's happened before. But we just, our confidence level is high in quarter over quarter new client signups.
And have you had a quarter where you didn't achieve that level of next growth and you were in maybe a bit of a tighter situation financially, or just unexpected?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it happened first quarter of last year. We had an amazing January and then February. And then the Silicon Valley Bank news hit in March. And it was like the whole pipeline just vanished. People got so scared so fast, and rational or irrational. It was like everyone just pumped the brakes for what appeared to be a good 6-10 weeks, more or less. We didn't see the funnel metrics kind of revive until a lot of these fears around Silicon Valley and First Republic. It was such a small episode, but it was the first time I'd experienced it.
Yeah.
Where, the confidence level, even at these, professional B2B levels, was just totally wiped out. And it wasn't speculation. We asked around, we wanted to know, like, hey, what took you so long to get back to us? It was just confidence. It was the news really freaked them out. So
how did you handle that? Like, take me back to that time. Were you stressed? Were you not sleeping? Like, how is it impacting you and impacting your team? Just share that first of all.
Well, with the team, I didn't really share. I mean, generally speaking, I see our company in 2 buckets. There's sales, B2B, and there's production. So Admittedly, I didn't tell anything to production, because they have experienced ups and downs, and sometimes it's like huge spikes, and sometimes it's meaningful valleys of business. So they were kind of indifferent to it. But our B2B sales team, it was serious discussions. It was like, is this something existential? Did something happen with email? Is our offer not interesting anymore? Are there new competitors? Are there complaints about us? It was
So
just
essentially, you were doing the same things you were doing before. Just you weren't seeing the response. You weren't kind of seeing the same level of metrics or
show up rate
conversations, right?
tanked, sales tanked for easily 2 months plus, and it was super stressful because you come off this high, that you're kicking ass for a while, and then all of a sudden you're not, and you're just wondering, how did the world change so quickly? And it was so overwhelmingly clear to us that the economic outlook, the confidence of business owners just tanked with the fears of Silicon Valley and First Republic. And we're a California-based organization, so that news was really felt out here, especially amongst admittedly higher income individuals. They're connected to folks in Silicon Valley and huge depositors, and so there was a lot of chatter and text going all around, people asking, should we move our dollars, should we get out of this bank? So it was just, we talked to such high net worth individuals that the alarms were raised for quite a bit of time.
So what did you do? How did you handle it? I know you said, you had lots of conversations, you're talking to people, you're thinking through it, but like ultimately take me back to that time when, did you consider having to let people go? Did you, cut your budgets back? Like what do you actually do to get through that period?
Yeah. So I just waited, to be frank. Like there wasn't much to do because of speculation that I had, and the feedback that I got from potential buyers was so clear that this was a very emotional moment in the market, especially in California.
Right.
So I didn't want to move anything. Our new revenue from new signups was at a low, but I just had confidence that these are things that happen in cycles. These things always happen. It may even happen in the next few days with whatever's happening with the CPI. And so, we're prepared for it now. But I think, I would have done something a little differently in terms of hedging for those valleys.
Now, in what way? Could you be more specific when you say like hedging for those valleys and preparing? What do you mean specifically?
Yeah. So if let's say our email campaigns aren't performing as well and our conversion rate is lower than normal, then I would address, for our buyers, I would address the offer. I would address pricing. I would address something pretty irresistible.
When you say address, do you mean like you would test something a little bit different, like test a different offer, to test a different angle, just essentially do something that maybe you haven't done before to try and see if that creates a better result?
Exactly. You want to get folks into your ecosystem, and I think testing an offer for people that already have contracts with you, that are reviewing contracts with you, I think that's something that I would do differently. And then with the acquisition of leads, a shortcut that I found that works quite well is running paid ads for a lead magnet, just running more ad dollars. So the hedges probably reduce, your margin in acquisition, which is fine, but at least you'll still be able to hedge for an overall loss of customers if there's this kind of emotional turmoil in the market.
Right. That makes sense. I want to talk more about kind of the marketing you're doing today, what else you've been doing to really, grow the business and the pipeline. But before we do that, something that I'm thinking about, and I'm guessing others are also wondering, you talked about, Joe or Sally, the law firm that wants to attract more Hispanic clients, and they don't speak Spanish. So walk me through that. So let's say you're attracting, Spanish speaking potential clients to these law firms, yet there's nobody in the law firm that necessarily speaks Spanish. So how do they handle those leads? How do they actually serve that client? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we only work with for Obligados now. We only work with law firms that have some bilingual staff,
Got you.
and
Okay.
so the chances are much higher that they have bilingual staff if we only reach out to attorneys in particular metropolitan areas, of which there's
Mm,
like 20, 25.
okay.
So we're not marketing ourselves as, for instance, attorneys in Iowa don't really know us, but attorneys in Texas and California certainly do.
Right. Got you. Okay. And so you'd have ads running or whatever the marketing kind of plan is. It's driving people to pages or content that is in Spanish. And then when that Spanish speaking kind of client slash customer opts in or gets in touch, there's someone that can also speak Spanish from that firm to help them and work with them.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's the minimum requirement to work with us. We've had attorneys that say I have no bilingual staff, but I want more clients. And I always tell them like that's impossible. You can't have both.
What do you
So
mean, Hugo? We got AI. Like you should just push a button and
if only, man.
I know,
Yeah.
right? All right. So you talked about the cold outreach, sending of the emails, which I find really interesting because there's kind of two camps when it comes to that, right? Those that feel cold email, it's so impersonal, like it doesn't work. It's a volume based game. Then you have others that who say like it works amazingly well when you know how to do it well. And what I've always found is that one of the key factors is how powerful or how compelling is your offer, right? If you have something that really speaks to like a pain point that somebody has or to a desire, then you can get a response. But if you're just general or if it's nothing that really connects with them, good luck, and you probably won't really see much benefit from that. What would you add to that, or what do you see differently in terms of somebody who might be thinking, cold outreach and picking up the phone or just doing something to a group of people that you don't have a relationship with yet is very challenging. How would you kind of counsel them on that?
Yeah, I'm actually not a big fan of cold email with a hard, sexy offer. I
Mm,
think that works well for probably the worst client I find.
mm,
Because if that end, if the reader, the end user sees an offer as intrinsically valuable, meaning that transaction as opposed to the relationship, I don't think it bears for it's going to yield a great client.
mm.
So the way I see cold email is one of, let's call it 40 different ad channel or like outreach channels that we have.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm a fan. Like, although there are clear winners in our funnel of channels that yield, a number of appointments or leads or even sales, I'm not partial to any one of them. I'm partial to the collective because if we cold email someone, it's very likely that they have already seen our social video ads or
Mm-hmm.
our blogging content, or may even be a member of our newsletter, or may have seen some paid ads, or may have seen us on a podcast, or have seen us at events.
Right.
So I think it's the what I tell our sales B2B team all the time is more is more. It's not less is more.
It's
It's
so
more
it's
is
kind of you're taking like an omnipresent approach where you're trying to
totally.
get you want to surround the ideal client in as many different ways as possible. What about when somebody's getting started? So let's say you bring on a new client that you're working with. I'm guessing that they don't necessarily have the budget to say like, yeah, let's do all 40 things right away. What do you typically, or what have you found is the right kind of series of steps or channels to work in, and in what specific order?
On the fulfillment side or on the
No, like
B2B
so
side?
let's say a consultant or consulting firm that wants to start being more proactive with
Oh yeah.
generating leads and opportunities. They've maybe just got their business to where it is right now based on referrals and doing good work, but they want to
Oh
be more
yeah.
proactive. What would you suggest for somebody like that to look into?
Okay, so certainly a mix of cold email and video content, like personal branded social content on all the channels,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then a newsletter. Those are the three things that I would say yield the highest quality person that will respond, because a newsletter reader will read,
Mm-hmm.
especially if there's you don't want to write something that's too short, but nor do you want something that's too long, because most people don't have time for it. But you want someone to read, and I find that people that read newsletters are the highest converting appointments. And I think it's just because they care about the details. They want to listen. They want to learn. It's a different cohort of a buyer than someone that's just coming from a paid ad.
Yeah.
I think paid ads should be at the very bottom of the list. I just generally think that, especially on a consulting side, you want really high quality clients in the beginning that are decent margin that you can build relationships with. So you have the newsletter, which comes from cold outreach, and you can get more newsletter subs from cold outreach plus your social media video presence. I think those three are super low cost. We're talking like less than $250 a month to do it by yourself.
Right.
And it's so high impact, and it just stands out. It makes you look unique. But I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You have to be interested in it, because if you're not interested in the things you're talking about, people can tell. You know, they can totally tell that like you're just reading from a script. I just like being myself, talking about the Hispanic market. To lawyers, I talk about their issues. To doctors, I talk about their issues. To other verticals, I try to understand what their pain points are and contextualize it into the Hispanic market. So I think those three channels afford you that opportunity to like expand on that expertise. And if you have a voice, if you have something interesting to say, people will want to hear it. You know, I'm just a fan of just being yourself on those three channels.
Yeah. On the newsletter side, I mean, one thing we've definitely worked with a lot of clients in our Clarity coaching program around as it relates to newsletters is making sure they have a very compelling, you know, lead magnet, or call it whatever you want, but something like a reason why somebody would join your newsletter list. Is there anything else that you would add to, and I may just to back up for a moment, as some people might not be clear on what I'm referring to. You go to some people's websites and it says, you know, like sign up for our newsletter, or like, you know, get notified. And there's like no real value. There's no real reason why somebody should give you their name and their email address. So we're talking about creating, you know, a checklist or a video, a training, just something that they actually are interested in getting, and therefore they'll give you their name and email address. Anything else that you would add to that from your experience of ways that people can build and attract, you know, more ideal clients onto their email list?
Yeah, I think the magnets are big when you can accelerate them with paid ads. I just think that methodology I find is a little too like sophisticated for, you know, most people. They don't have the patience for it, but I think it's the highest quality way to get a newsletter sign up. So let's say you work in let's call it entertainment. Let's say you want you're a publicist for agents, right? So you represent people who represent their clients. So you could run, let's call it a $1,500 paid ad campaign over 2 weeks, and you put an ad on Facebook. It could be a video ad or an image, and it says, you know, the agency, the Hollywood Agent PR Insider. And so it's an exclusive membership, an exclusive weekly newsletter or an exclusive daily newsletter about the things that are affecting Hollywood, West LA, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica. So you're just kind of like showing that you know the areas, you know where Hollywood stands, you know where the business moves. And then you could even say, get invited to exclusive events or our next mixer by signing up. So that is technically a lead magnet. That invitation,
Right.
it might cost you, you know, another $1,000 to host a bar, a dinner party at a bar or something. But ultimately, you're going to get a high value target ICP client signing up. You might have 50 people on your newsletter, but those are 50 people in your that are your ICP.
Right.
So I'm not a big fan of like newsletters at scale. I like newsletters that are super concentrated with your ideal buyer. They have low unsubscription rates. They love what you have to offer. But yeah, you have to give something up. That's a thing. Like the lead magnet, I've seen really good lead magnets as webinars, tickets to live events. You know, I saw one agency give out their keyword list, which I thought was interesting. Another agency I saw give a list of zip codes that have the best e-com buyers. So you have to give something of value to the extent that you have to ask yourself, would I pay for this? You know, would I pay to go to that Hollywood event? Would I pay for that keyword list? Would I pay for that list of zip codes of e-com buyers? if your answer is yes, then it's probably valuable to someone else as well.
Definitely.
I'm like, I think that you just have to offer something of value.
Another question I have for you is you built the team up now, right? Between full-time, kind of part-time contractors, 50 people or so. What do you spend your time on right now? I know you've kind of shifted, you've been able to extract yourself from many things. So where do you put your time?
So we built Abogados now to the point where it could, to an extent, predictably bring on new attorneys, and our fulfillment team can predictably manage them. So it's a really privileged place to be. And so now we're expanding. We're expanding to Doctores now, which right now it's for medical professionals offering the same Hispanic digital marketing solutions. We're focusing on dentists and learning what works, what doesn't. We're also getting into the financial sector and into more larger brand Hispanic video marketing solutions. So I'm in the process of building 4 companies right now, 3 of which are very new. And it's going against all conventions of everything that everyone's told me. But I think we're on the right path. My gut is telling me this is the right thing to do.
Right.
So
Are you
now
using kind of the revenue or profit from the first company to essentially feed and support the other companies?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to. And it's measured, it's slow growth, because as opposed to just trying to sign a bunch of clients, we want to sign, but we more so want to learn about the client before we make such an aggressive outreach effort like we did on the attorney side.
And would you, like, just with the benefit of hindsight, would you have started, or do you think you could have started this diversification earlier, or do you think it was the right move to wait as long as you did to get the business to kind of where it's at before starting, these additional kind of divisions or businesses?
Well, I mean, I don't think I could have started it sooner because I thought my niche was legal, with that twist of Hispanic marketing. But it was only a couple years ago, more or less, that I realized that the niche is Hispanic marketing.
Yeah.
And I need to evangelize this beyond attorneys, because like I mentioned, 20% of the U.S. is Hispanic. Every business could virtually benefit from speaking directly to this market. So, I was just really focused on attorneys in the beginning, and I'm glad I was, because it made us hyper focused. It got us to where we're at now. But now I need to delegate that kind of like passion for understanding these verticals, and so I'm really more focused on building out these other verticals, these other companies, and no regrets. I think it's the right time. I don't think we could have afforded it either a couple of years ago.
And do you think that there's still significant growth in the legal market? And so I'm wondering, like, somebody might be listening and thinking, why not just put all of your energy and effort into making what's already working better and bigger, and blowing that up, as opposed to diversifying, taking profit away from something that's already working into something that is not necessarily yet working. Like you're doing R&D to a degree, right, and planning for it to work out. But what was your thought process around making that decision to not just kind of focus on what's already working and make it bigger, and then to diversify instead?
I mean, I've gone out of the way, and it's helped our company grow.
Okay.
And so that was my logic, that this can continue growing without my intimate involvement in every single scaling exercise. And that's why it feels like such a huge privilege right now to be able to do all these other things. So yeah, I mean, the majority of folks that I hear from when I tell them this, they're saying just go all in on Abogados. And I think there's merit to that, but I'm also excited to build other stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue honoring what we're doing in Abogados. We haven't even scratched the surface of the addressable market there. But again, as I've moved out of the way, we've been able to continue to scale. And so I just want to have that level of impact. Like attorneys, I've seen attorneys build their businesses from 100,000 a year to 10 million a year with their services. And I'm like, that's great. Why can't we do that with everyone else? Like we're doing our fellow entrepreneurs a disservice by not telling this to everyone else. So there's just like something holistic that I'm like mission driven there. but also there's a huge business opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just the right time, and I'm still excited. So I just want to continue doing that.
It sounds like a key kind of component that has allowed for this level of sustained and consistent, ongoing growth, even with you not as involved or involved at all anymore, Hugo, on the legal side, is good people. And I'm sure there's systems and process as well. But if you were to just maybe point to, if somebody said, hey, I'm looking to scale and to grow my business, and I'm wondering how to think about, who to hire and what should I be looking for? I know it's a big question. There's a lot of different components, but what kind of principles have you lived by or follow when it comes to hiring, firing, building teams? Anything kind of really stand out that you make sure that you and the team are always aware of?
Yeah, so I still consider myself super green as a business owner. And when we scaled and hired a lot of people, especially in the last 2 years, our management team, which is a very tight knit group, I'm so proud of that group. When we got together and looked back, we said, man, we made a lot of mistakes hiring the wrong people. And we asked ourselves, like, why? And there's a shorthand between us because we got lucky. I really believe that there's a degree of luck when you hire the right people at the same time. But as we scale, you can't rely on luck. So what we said was, how do we figure out how to hire someone? So what we did was we interviewed one another, figured out all the qualities that we liked, and we found out that very few of the qualities that we wrote down were about the trade. So now the trade is second. The thing that we look for first is a lot of character-based signals. So we had to do what I thought was a really cheesy exercise initially, like a mission and values statement exercise.
Right.
I thought that was just like corporate jargon. I could not be more of an ambassador of this system than ever. It's we got all this data from one another's interviews from one each other, and we distilled it down to the things that we value the most in one another and what we want to look for in new hires.
Mm-hmm.
So now when we interview, it's we the experience is already accounted for in a CV. What we dive into is if they're aligned to our values. Like, are you aligned to growth? Are you aligned to autonomy? Are you aligned to transparency? Are you aligned to being performance driven? Are you aligned to being yourself, meaning not trying to put on a mask when you come to work?
Sure.
Are you so I think that values statement exercise has done us so much good, because now we've identified who we are, and now we can more easily identify an interview for who it is that we want beyond skills and trade.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm really glad that you shared it. So, Hugo Gomez, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Consulting Success podcast here and sharing just some of your journey. Excited to follow along and see as you build out these other businesses. Where's the best place for people who want to learn more about you and about your company? Where should we send them to?
Yeah, so bilingualmarketing.com is our parent company that owns these entities. And so bilingualmarketing.com, you could find an email there. It says Hola, Hola, at bilingualmarketing.com. And that's a direct line to me if you ever want to chat about any of our companies or any of our Hispanic marketing strategies.
All right. We will link all that up in the show notes. Hugo, again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Michael.